The brush slipped from Olivia Hartwell's fingers and clattered against the marble floor, shattering the silence of the throne room like a gunshot, because the face she'd been painting for the last 3 hours wasn't reflected in the ornate mirror hanging directly behind her subject. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at the gilded frame, at the empty throne visible in its reflection, at the complete absence of the man who sat not 15 feet in front of her, the Vampire King, whose portrait she'd been commissioned to paint, who she'd forgotten, God help her, actually forgotten, casts no reflection. Something wrong, Miss Hartwell? His voice rolled through the cavernous space like distant thunder, cultured and ancient and far too amused. Olivia's eyes snapped from the mirror to the vampire himself, to Draconis Nightshade, who reclined on his obsidian throne with the lazy confidence of someone who'd ruled for centuries. His white hair fell past his shoulders in a cascade of silk, stark against the black velvet of his coat. His skin was pale as moonlight, flawless and cold, and his eyes crimson and knowing fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "I know, Your Majesty," Olivia stammered, crouching to retrieve her brush with trembling fingers. I dropped my brush, did you?" It wasn't a question. He shifted slightly, and candlelight danced across the sharp angles of his face, the aristocratic slope of his nose, the cruel beauty of his mouth. "You looked at the mirror." Heat flooded her cheeks. There was no point in lying not to someone who'd probably heard the spike in her heartbeat, smelled the fear suddenly coursing through her veins. "Yes, and you realized." "Yes." Silence stretched between them, heavy and dangerous. Olivia had been painting for nearly 8 years, had built a reputation as one of the finest portrait artists in the city. But this was her first commission from the vampire court. She'd been terrified when the summons came, delivered by a pale-skinned courier who'd appeared at her studio door at midnight. Terrified and thrilled, because no human artist had painted the Vampire King in over a century, and the fee they'd offered could keep her fed and housed for 5 years. Now she wondered if she'd live long enough to collect it. "I apologize, Your Majesty," she said quietly, rising to her feet and clutching her brush like a lifeline. "It won't happen again. You forgot." His tone held a strange note, something between disbelief and fascination. "In all the time you've been here, sketching me, studying me, mixing your paints to capture the precise shade of my eyes, you forgot what I am." Olivia swallowed hard. "I was focused on the work, focused." He rose from his throne in one fluid motion, and suddenly the distance between them felt like nothing at all. He didn't walk so much as glide, his movements impossibly graceful, predatory. "Tell me, Miss Hartwell, do you often forget that you're painting monsters?" "You're not a monster." The words escaped before she could stop them, reckless and foolish. "You're my subject." Something flickered across his perfect features, surprise perhaps, or something darker. He stopped a few paces away, close enough that she could see the inhuman stillness of his chest, the way he didn't breathe unless he chose to. Close enough that she caught his scent, winter frost and old parchment, and something indefinably ancient. "Your subject," he repeated softly. "How refreshingly professional." "I take my work seriously, Your Majesty. I can see that." His gaze dropped to the canvas on her easel, and for the first time since she'd arrived at his underground court, a vast network of palatial chambers hidden beneath the city's oldest cathedral, she saw genuine interest cross his face. He moved toward the painting, and Olivia's breath caught as he studied her work with the careful attention of someone who understood art. She'd captured him in 3/4 profile, his face emerging from shadow and candlelight, his expression regal and remote. But there was something else there too. Something she hadn't quite intended, a loneliness in the set of his jaw, a weariness in his eyes that spoke of too many centuries, too many losses. "You see too much," he murmured. "I paint what I see, do you?" He turned to face her fully, and the weight of his attention was almost physical. "And what do you see when you look at me, Olivia Hartwell?" The sound of her first name on his lips sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "I see someone who's tired of sitting still," she said, aiming for levity and missing by a mile. "You've been very patient, but I can tell you'd rather be anywhere else." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "You're perceptive. I loathe sitting for portraits." "Then why commission one?" "Politics." The word came out like a curse. The vampire courts across the world exchange portraits as gestures of goodwill, reminders of alliances and treaties. "I haven't had one painted in 140 years. My advisors insisted." Olivia found herself relaxing slightly, drawn into the conversation despite her lingering fear. "You didn't have any painted during the age of photography?" "Photographs don't work well for my kind. We appear but poorly. Blurred. Wrong." He gestured at her canvas. However, this is different. This has life." Pride bloomed warm in her chest. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I haven't decided if I like what you've revealed." The moment of ease shattered. Olivia gripped her brush tighter, acutely aware that she was alone with a predator who could end her life before she could scream. If there's something you'd like changed, no. The word was firm, final, no changes, it's honest. Uncomfortably so. He tilted his head, studying her now instead of the painting. You're not afraid enough. I'm terrified, she admitted. I'm just trying not to show it. Why? Because you haven't given me a reason to run yet. The silence that followed was different from before, charged electric. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the mask of aristocratic indifference. You're either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. This time his smile was real, brief and startling. It transformed his face, made him look less like an immortal king and more like someone, just someone. Return tomorrow night, he said abruptly. Same time. Bring your paints. We're continuing the sessions? Unless you'd prefer not to. Olivia thought about the commission, about the money, about the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to add the Vampire King to her portfolio. She thought about the way her hands had trembled when she'd mixed the paint for his eyes, trying to capture that precise shade of crimson. She thought about the loneliness she'd seen in his face, the weight of centuries. I'll be here, she said. He nodded once, dismissive, and turned back toward his throne. Olivia gathered her supplies with shaking hands, packing her paints and brushes into her worn leather case. She was halfway to the massive double doors when his voice stopped her. Miss Hartwell. She turned. Yes? The mirror bothered you. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. I'll have it removed before tomorrow. Something warm and unexpected unfurled in her chest. Thank you, Your Majesty. She left before he could see the smile she couldn't quite suppress, before he could hear the way her heart had stuttered at the small kindness. Behind her, Draconis Nightshade settled onto his throne and stared at the empty easel, at the space where a human woman had stood and looked at him, really looked at him, and somehow forgotten to see a monster. It had been a very long time since anyone had made him feel like just a subject. The next evening, Olivia arrived at the hidden entrance to the vampire court with her supplies and a nervous energy she couldn't quite shake. The journey down through the cathedral's abandoned crypt, down spiral stairs carved from ancient stone, past guards with pale skin and red eyes, felt less terrifying than it had the first time. Almost familiar, the throne room was exactly as she'd left it. With one notable exception, the mirror was gone. In its place hung a tapestry depicting a night sky full of stars, beautiful and melancholic. Punctual, Draconis observed from his throne. Tonight he wore deep burgundy, the color of old wine, and his white hair was pulled back from his face with a silver clasp. I appreciate that in an artist. Thank you for removing the mirror, Your Majesty. Olivia set up her easel, arranging her paints with practiced efficiency. It was a distraction. He settled into his pose from the previous night, angling his body just so. We can't have your focus divided. They fell into a comfortable silence, broken only by the soft scratch of bristles on canvas and the whisper of Olivia's breathing. She worked steadily, building up layers of color, refining the planes of his face. An hour passed, then two. Tell me about yourself, Draconis said suddenly. Olivia's brush paused mid-stroke. Your Majesty, you know who I am, everyone knows who I am. But I know nothing of you except that you paint honestly and forget to fear me. His eyes found hers across the candlelit space. Indulge my curiosity. She resumed painting, using the work as a shield. There's not much to tell. I'm 24, I've been painting since I was 16. I live alone in a studio apartment above my workspace. Family gone. The word came out flat. My parents died in a car accident when I was 18. No siblings, I'm sorry. The genuine sympathy in his voice caught her off guard. It was 6 years ago. Time doesn't always heal, he said quietly. Sometimes it just teaches you to carry the weight better. Olivia looked up from her canvas, really looked at him, and saw understanding in those ancient eyes. How long have you been king? 347 years. And before that, a prince, a soldier, a son. He shifted slightly, his gaze growing distant. Someone who still remembered what sunlight felt like on his skin. The raw honesty stole her breath. Do you miss it? The sun? Every single day. His attention returned to her, sharp and focused. But we play the hand we're dealt, don't we? Make the best of our circumstances. Is that what you've done? Made the best of immortality and power? Some days. A wry smile touched his lips. Other days I sit for portraits and contemplate the tedium of eternity. Olivia laughed before she could stop herself, then immediately covered her mouth. I'm sorry, don't be. I like your laugh. He stood abruptly, stretching with a grace that seemed almost feline. Enough sitting, I need to move before I go mad. But the painting will still be there in 10 minutes. He crossed to a side table laden with crystal decanters and glasses. Do you drink wine? Sometimes. This is from 1847. A very good year. He poured 2 glasses, carried one to her. Consider it payment for tolerating my restlessness. Olivia accepted the glass carefully, hyper-aware of how close he stood, how his fingers brushed hers in the exchange. The wine was deep red, almost the color of his eyes. Should I be worried about what's in this? Just wine. I don't need to drug humans to make them compliant. He returned to the throne but didn't sit, instead leaning against its arm in a casual pose she immediately wanted to capture. We have other methods, Thrall, she said, remembering the stories. Mind control, influence, he corrected. And I'm not using it on you, if that's what concerns you. How would I know? You wouldn't, you'd have to trust me. Olivia sipped the wine. It was extraordinary, rich and complex and considered. I think I do. Trust you. I mean, why? Because you had the mirror removed. Because you apologized about my parents. Because she hesitated, then plunged forward. Because you could have hurt me last night when I realized what you were, but instead you asked me to come back. Draconis was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. You credit me with more nobility than I possess. I paint what I see, she repeated. And I see someone who's trying to what? To be more than what people expect, he laughed, short and sharp. You see far too much, Olivia Hartwell. The session ended an hour later, with the painting noticeably progressed and Olivia's perception of the Vampire King irrevocably changed. He walked her to the doors himself, an unprecedented gesture that made the guard's eyes widen. Tomorrow? He asked. Tomorrow, she confirmed. Good. He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. Be careful on your way home. The city isn't safe after dark. I'll be fine. Nevertheless, he gestured, and one of the guards stepped forward. Marcus will escort you to the cathedral's exit. Olivia wanted to protest, to insist she didn't need protection, but the concern in Draconis' eyes stopped her. Thank you, Your Majesty. She was halfway up the spiral stairs when she realized he'd called her Olivia again, not Miss Hartwell. The thought warmed her all the way home. The sessions became routine over the following week. Olivia would arrive at sunset, set up her supplies and paint while Draconis posed, and they talked. They discussed everything: art and history, music and literature, philosophy and politics. He told her about the vampire courts, about the delicate balance of power that kept their kind from descending into chaos. She told him about her struggles as an artist, about the patrons who wanted safe, flattering portraits instead of truth. You should paint what calls to you, he said one evening, watching her mix colors. Not what sells. Easy to say when you don't have rent to pay. I could help with that. Olivia's brush stilled. No, why not? I have resources beyond measure, because I don't want to be kept. She met his eyes steadily. I want to earn my success. Respect flickered across his features. Pride. I understand that, do you? You were born a prince. True, but I've fought for everything I have now. The throne wasn't handed to me. I took it from a tyrant who ruled through fear and cruelty. I ended a war that had raged for 50 years. I built alliances out of ashes and suspicion. His voice hardened. Don't assume my position came without cost. I'm sorry, you're right. Olivia set down her palette. Tell me about the war. He did, painting a picture with words as vivid as anything on her canvas. He spoke of battles fought in darkness, of political machinations and betrayals, of the moment he'd driven a stake through the old king's heart and claimed the crown soaked in blood. He spoke of the peace he'd forged afterward, fragile and precious. You care about your people, Olivia said softly. Really care. They're my responsibility. It's more than that. He looked at her for a long moment, candlelight catching in his crimson eyes. Perhaps. That night, when Marcus escorted her up the stairs, Olivia noticed other vampires watching from the shadows. Courtiers. She assumed, curious about the human who spent hours alone with their king. She felt the weight of their stares, knew they were assessing her, judging her. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, she found herself thinking about the loneliness she'd painted into Draconis' portrait, about 347 years of watching everyone he might care about age and die while he remained unchanged. About the weight of a crown that couldn't be set down. She understood loneliness. She'd been drowning in it since her parents died, filling the emptiness with work and paint, and the safe distance of canvas between herself and real connection. But Draconis' isolation was something else entirely, a gulf of centuries, of fundamental difference. And yet, when they talked, she forgot he was a vampire, forgot he could kill her without effort, forgot everything except the sharp intelligence in his eyes, the dry humor in his voice, the unexpected gentleness in his hands when he'd reached out last night to adjust her easel and their fingers had brushed. That touch had haunted her all day. The portrait was nearly complete when everything changed. Olivia arrived for their session to find the throne room in chaos. Vampires filled the space, courtiers in elaborate dress, guards in black armor, all speaking in urgent, angry whispers. Draconis stood at the center of the storm, his face carved from ice, listening to a vampire who knelt before the throne. She hung back near the doors, uncertain if she should stay or leave. Draconis's eyes found hers across the crowd, and something in his expression shifted. "Out," he commanded, his voice cutting through the noise. Everyone except Miss Hartwell. The courtiers filed out, shooting curious glances at Olivia as they passed. Within moments, the throne room was empty except for the two of them and the kneeling vampire. "Speak," Draconis ordered. "Tell her what you told me." The vampire, young by their standards, maybe only a century old, looked terrified. "There's been an attack, Your Majesty. Lord Constantine's faction struck at one of our border territories. 3 guards dead, a human settlement razed." Olivia's blood ran cold. "Human? Constantine wants war," Draconis said, his voice deadly quiet. "He's opposed to the peace accords I signed with the human governments. He thinks we should rule openly, take what we want instead of hiding in shadows." His hands clenched. "This attack is a provocation. What will you do?" "What I must." He turned to the messenger. "Gather my war council. We meet in 1 hour." The vampire bowed and fled, leaving them alone. Silence stretched taut between them. "You should go," Draconis said finally. "It's not safe for you here now. If Constantine knows about you, knows you've been coming here, why would he care about me?" The look he gave her was almost pitying. "Because you matter to me." The words hung in the air like a confession. Olivia's heart hammered against her ribs. "Your Majesty, Draconis." He crossed to her in 3 swift strides, close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands trembled slightly before he fisted them at his sides. "When we're alone, call me Draconis. Draconis," she whispered. "I can't let him use you against me. I can't." He stopped, jaw working. "You need to leave the city. Tonight. I'll arrange transport, protection, enough money to start over somewhere safe." "No, this isn't a request, I know." Olivia stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "And I'm still saying no. I'm not running. You don't understand what you're refusing. I understand perfectly." Her voice shook but held firm. "You're trying to protect me, I'm grateful. But I'm not leaving you to face this alone. I won't be alone. I have an army, a court. That's not what I mean, and you know it." The tension between them crystallized into something electric, dangerous. Draconis stared at her like she was a puzzle he couldn't solve, like she'd spoken a language he'd forgotten. "Why?" he asked hoarsely. "Why would you stay? You barely know me." "I know enough." Olivia reached up, her hand hovering near his face. "I know you're tired. I know you carry too much weight alone. I know," her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I know you see me as more than just your portrait artist." His hand caught hers, cold fingers wrapping around her warm ones. "Olivia, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me these weeks have been nothing more than sitting for a painting. And I'll go." "I can't." The admission seemed torn from him. "God help me, I can't." Then his mouth was on hers, and the world narrowed to the press of his lips, the cool silk of his hair tangling in her fingers, the desperate way he pulled her closer as if she might disappear. He kissed like a man starving, like he'd forgotten what sweetness tasted like, and was trying to memorize it all at once. Olivia melted into him, into the impossible reality of kissing the vampire king in his throne room surrounded by candlelight. He was gentle despite his obvious hunger, his hands cradling her face like she was precious, breakable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her from need, him from habit, Draconis pressed his forehead to hers. "This is madness," he murmured. "Probably. You should fear me. I should do a lot of things." A shaky laugh escaped him. "What am I going to do with you?" "Keep me." The words came out braver than she felt. "Let me stay. Let me finish the portrait. Let me," she swallowed hard, "let me be here for you. If I do, you're in danger, real danger. I know. Constantine will see you as leverage. Then we'll have to make sure he doesn't get to me." Draconis pulled back enough to study her face, searching for doubt or fear. Whatever he found made his expression soften. "You're certain?" "Yes." "Then we do this my way. You stay in the palace. There are guest chambers, luxurious ones. You don't leave without guards. You don't go anywhere alone." His voice turned hard. "And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." "Agreed." He kissed her again, softer this time, almost reverent. "I'll have Marcus prepare a room for you. And Olivia?" "Yes?" "Finish the portrait. I want to see what you've created before everything goes to hell." The War Council meeting lasted 3 hours. Olivia spent the time in her new chambers, a suite of rooms decorated in deep blues and silvers, impossibly elegant, trying to process everything that had happened. She'd kissed the vampire king. She'd agreed to stay in his palace while a rival vampire lord threatened war. She'd upended her entire life in the space of a single evening. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt alive for the first time in years. A knock at the door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in," she called. Marcus entered, carrying her art supplies. His Majesty thought you might want these. Thank you. Olivia took the familiar leather case, comforted by its weight. How bad is it? The threat from Constantine? The guard hesitated, clearly weighing how much to say. Bad enough. But King Draconis has faced worse and prevailed. He'll find a way. You're loyal to him, to the death. Marcus said it simply, like stating a fact. He's a good king. Fair, strong. He cares about more than just power. I've noticed. A ghost of a smile crossed the vampire's pale face. Yes, I imagine you have. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Miss Hartwell, you make him happy. I haven't seen that in a very long time. Olivia was still processing those words when Draconis appeared in her doorway an hour later, looking exhausted. May I come in? It's your palace. It's your room. He waited until she nodded before entering, closing the door behind him. I wanted to check on you. I'm fine. How was the council? Contentious. Half want to march on Constantine immediately, the other half counsel patience. He sank into a chair by the fireplace, all the regal bearings stripped away, leaving just a man, a vampire who'd been carrying the world too long. I'm trying to find a middle path. Olivia moved to stand behind him, her hands settling on his shoulders. He went rigid with surprise. What are you doing? You're tense. She began to knead the muscles, feeling knots that had probably been there for decades. Let me help. He was silent for a long moment, then slowly, incrementally relaxed under her touch. This is nice. Good. They stayed like that for a while, the only sound the crackle of the fire and Draconis's occasional sighs. Finally he reached up to cover one of her hands with his own. I meant what I said earlier. You matter to me. Olivia's heart swelled. You matter to me too. This won't be easy. Even if we resolve the Constantine situation, there will be others who oppose a relationship between a vampire king and a human. I know, you'll age. I won't. I know that too. Olivia, she came around the chair to face him, taking both his hands in hers. I'm not naive, I understand the challenges. But I also know that what I feel when I'm with you is real, worth fighting for, worth the complications. What do you feel? His voice was barely a whisper. Like I've been sleepwalking through my life and you woke me up. She squeezed his fingers. Like I finally found someone who sees me, really sees me the way I see them. Like I'm home. Something cracked in his carefully maintained composure. He pulled her down into his lap, burying his face in her hair. I've been alone so long, he confessed. So damn long. And then you walked into my throne room with your paints and your honesty. And suddenly I remembered what it felt like to want something beyond duty. Olivia held him, this ancient powerful creature who was letting her see his vulnerability. You don't have to be alone anymore. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you'll tell me if this becomes too much. If the danger, the politics, the reality of what I am, if it ever becomes too heavy, you'll tell me. I won't hold you to this if you change your mind, Draconis. She pulled back to look him in the eye. I'm not going anywhere. You're stuck with me. The smile that transformed his face was worth every risk, every complication. He kissed her thoroughly, taking his time, and Olivia lost herself in the sensation of being wanted, being held, being home. When they finally parted, Draconis rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me tonight. Just sleep, I don't need it, but I'd like to hold you. I'd like that too. They ended up in his chambers grander than hers, decorated in blacks and deep reds, dominated by an enormous bed that looked like it belonged in a Gothic cathedral. Olivia changed into a nightgown one of the servants had left in her room, and when she emerged from the adjoining bathroom, Draconis was already in bed, propped against a mountain of pillows. This is strange, she admitted, climbing in beside him. Good strange, but strange, agreed. He pulled her close, arranging them so her head rested on his chest. I haven't shared a bed with anyone in over a century. That's a long time to be alone. It is. His fingers traced idle patterns on her shoulder. But I'd rather be alone than settle for something hollow. And this, us? This is the least hollow thing I've felt in 300 years. Olivia drifted off to sleep, listening to the silence where his heartbeat should have been, feeling safer than she had in years. She woke to chaos. Alarms blared through the palace, magical wards shrieking their warnings. Draconis was already gone from the bed, dressed in black armor that looked like it had been forged from midnight itself. He was strapping weapons to his body with lethal efficiency. What's happening? Olivia scrambled upright. Constantine's attacking. The wards detected his forces approaching. They'll be here within minutes. He crossed to her, cupping her face in his cold hands. I need you to go to the safe room. Marcus will take you. No, Olivia. His voice was steel. This is what I was afraid of. He's coming for me and he'll go through anyone in his path. Please, let me protect you. The fear in his eyes decided her. Okay, but you come back to me, do you understand? You don't get to make me fall for you and then die. I don't intend to. He kissed her hard and fast. Go now. Marcus appeared at the door, and Olivia let the guard pull her away, looking back to see Draconis striding toward the throne room, every inch the warrior king. The safe room turned out to be a fortified chamber deep in the palace, spelled and warded, with several other humans inside, servants, staff, people under the court's protection. "What happens now?" Olivia asked Marcus. "We wait and we pray His Majesty wins." The sounds of battle filtered through even the thick walls, crashes, shouts, the clash of weapons. Olivia paced like a caged animal, desperate for news, terrified of what might be happening above. An hour passed. Then finally the door opened. Draconis stood there, spattered with blood that wasn't his own, exhausted but whole. His eyes found Olivia immediately, and the relief that crossed his face was palpable. "It's over," he said. "Constantine's dead." Olivia rushed to him, not caring about the blood or the armor or the other people watching. He caught her in his arms, holding tight. "You're okay," she breathed against his neck. "I'm okay." He pulled back to look at her. "He thought attacking directly would catch me off guard. He underestimated my defenses and my motivation to survive. What happens now? Now I consolidate power, make it clear that challenges to my rule won't be tolerated." His expression hardened. "And I make sure everyone knows that you're under my protection. Anyone who threatens you threatens me." Over the following days, Draconis was true to his word. He declared Olivia his consort in front of the entire vampire court, a formal recognition of their relationship that made her position unassailable. There were whispers, of course, disapproval from the more traditional vampires, who thought their king should choose one of their own kind. But Draconis shut down dissent with ruthless efficiency. "You're mine," he told her one evening as they stood on a balcony overlooking his underground realm. "I don't care what anyone thinks about it." "Yours," Olivia agreed, leaning into his embrace. "And you're mine." "Yes." The portrait was finally finished 3 weeks after the attack. Olivia had worked on it in stolen moments between council meetings and formal dinners, between learning the intricacies of vampire politics and navigating her new role. When she finally set down her brush and stepped back, Draconis came to stand beside her. They studied the painting together in silence. She'd captured him perfectly, the sharp beauty of his features, the weight in his eyes, the regal bearing. But she'd also captured something else, something new that had emerged over their weeks together. Hope. A softness around his mouth, a light in his gaze that suggested he was looking toward a future instead of drowning in the past. "It's extraordinary," Draconis said quietly. "You've made me look almost human. You are in the ways that matter." He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "I love you, Olivia Hartwell. I know it's fast, I know it's complicated, but it's true. I love you." Joy exploded in her chest, bright and fierce. "I love you too, so much." This kiss was different from the others, not desperate or hungry, but certain. A promise. When they finally pulled apart, Draconis smiled, and it was the most beautiful thing Olivia had ever seen. "Will you stay, not just for now, but for as long as we have?" "However long that is?" "Yes." She didn't hesitate. "For as long as we have." The portrait was sent to the other vampire courts as planned, a declaration of Draconis's continued rule and power. But Olivia painted another version too, just for them, one that hung in their private chambers, a reminder of the night she'd forgotten. He cast no reflection, and started seeing the man instead of the monster. The months that followed weren't easy. There were challenges to navigate: political tensions, cultural differences, the constant awareness of the ticking clock of Olivia's mortality. But there were also quiet evenings spent painting, while Draconis read aloud from ancient books. Formal dances where he taught her the steps of courtly waltzes that predated her great-grandparents, and stolen moments of laughter that echoed through the palace halls. Olivia continued her work, painting portraits of court members and visiting dignitaries, building a reputation as the vampire court's official artist. She negotiated a stipend that let her donate pieces to human galleries, maintaining connections to her old world even as she built a life in this new one. And Draconis, her vampire king, her love ruled with wisdom and strength, but now with someone beside him who reminded him why he fought so hard for peace, who saw him not as a monster or a king, but as Draconis. Just Draconis. A year after she'd first walked into his throne room, they stood together on that same balcony, watching the eternal night of his underground realm. "Do you regret it?" Draconis asked softly. "Giving up the sun, the normal life you could have had?" Olivia considered, honest as always. "Sometimes I miss daylight. But I've gained something more valuable." "What's that?" "A partner, a purpose, a love that's worth any sacrifice." She turned to face him, reaching up to trace the sharp line of his jaw. "You were worth every choice I made." He kissed her tenderly, reverently, like she was something precious beyond measure. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." His laugh was warm and real and completely human. Forever, if you'll have me. Forever sounds perfect. They stood there together, vampire and human, king and artist, two souls who'd found each other across an impossible divide. Above them in the human world the sun was rising on a new day. But here, in the eternal darkness of the vampire realm, Olivia had found her light, and Draconis, who had ruled alone for centuries, had finally found his home. The seasons changed in the world above while their love deepened below. Olivia celebrated her 25th birthday surrounded by vampires who'd gradually grown to accept and even respect her. Draconis presenting her with gifts that ranged from priceless to absurdly thoughtful, a set of brushes made from materials that would last a lifetime, a necklace that had belonged to his mother, and a small canvas he'd painted himself, crude but earnest. "You painted," she'd said, delighted. "Badly, but you've inspired me to try." He'd looked almost embarrassed. "I thought I'd forgotten how to create anything that wasn't political or strategic." She'd kissed him thoroughly and hung his painting beside her own work. Proof that even ancient vampires could learn new things. There were difficulties, of course. A faction of traditionalist vampires tried to undermine Draconis' authority by questioning his choice of a human consort, spreading rumors that he'd grown weak, that his judgment was compromised. He dealt with them swiftly and decisively, making it clear that attacks on Olivia were attacks on him. "You didn't have to be so harsh," she'd told him after he'd banished 3 of the ringleaders to distant territories. "Yes, I did." His eyes had been hard. "The moment I show weakness where you're concerned, the moment I let anyone think they can hurt you without consequences, you become a target. I won't allow that." His protectiveness could be overwhelming sometimes. But Olivia understood it came from a place of love and centuries of losing people he cared about. She learned to accept his need to keep her safe while also carving out her own independence, her own power within the court. She became a bridge between the vampire and human worlds, using her unique position to strengthen the peace accords, to advocate for better protections for humans under vampire governance. Draconis supported her fully, proud of the way she wielded influence with grace and intelligence. "You're a natural diplomat," he told her one evening after she'd successfully negotiated a trade agreement between a vampire territory and a human city. "I learned from the best. Flatterer. Truth-teller. You know I don't lie." It was true, her honesty had become legendary in the court. Vampires who wanted straight answers came to her, knowing she'd paint the situation as clearly as she painted portraits. It was a strange kind of power, but it was hers. 2 years into their relationship, Draconis called a formal council to discuss something he called a matter of succession. Olivia attended as she always did, sitting beside his throne in a chair that had been added specifically for her. "I've ruled for 3.5 centuries, Draconis began, his voice carrying through the great hall. "And I intend to rule for centuries more. But I've been thinking about the future, about what happens when I eventually step down." Murmurs rippled through the assembled vampires. Olivia kept her expression neutral, though her heart raced. Traditionally, vampire kings rule until they're challenged and defeated, or until they choose to embrace final death. "But I'm proposing something different." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "I'm proposing that we establish a council of regents, a system of governance that doesn't rely solely on one individual. A transition of power that's planned, not violent." The hall erupted in shocked whispers. Olivia watched, fascinated, as Draconis laid out a vision for the future, one where vampire governance evolved, became more stable, less dependent on the whims of individual rulers. "And who would sit on this council?" asked Valeria Crimson, one of the oldest vampires in court. "Representatives from each major territory, elected by their peers, serving limited terms, with built-in checks and balances to prevent any one faction from gaining too much power." Draconis' gaze swept the room. "I'm not suggesting we implement this immediately, but I want us to start planning for it, to consider what our society could become." The debate lasted hours, passionate and often contentious, but by the end a tentative agreement had been reached to form a committee to explore Draconis' proposal. Later, in their chambers, Olivia asked the question that had been burning in her mind all evening. "This is because of me, isn't it? Because I'm mortal?" Draconis was quiet for a long moment. "Partly. Loving you has made me think about impermanence differently, about what I want to leave behind." He took her hand. "But it's also the right thing for our people. Constantine's challenge proved that the old ways breed violence and instability. It's time for something new. You're going to change vampire society. I'm going to try." He smiled. "With you beside me." Olivia's influence on Draconis and the vampire court continued to grow. She established an art program, bringing human and vampire artists together for collaborative projects that broke down barriers and built understanding. She advocated for educational exchanges, for cultural programs, for all the small steps that made the two worlds less foreign to each other. And through it all, her relationship with Draconis remained the center of her world. They grew together, learned together, challenged each other to be better. He taught her about patience and long-term strategy, about seeing patterns that played out over decades. She taught him about spontaneity and joy, about living in the moment instead of being trapped in the weight of centuries. 3 years after she'd first walked into his throne room, Draconis took her to a place he'd never shown anyone, a private chamber at the very heart of his palace, accessible only through hidden passages and locked with magic keyed to his blood. Inside was a garden. Olivia gasped at the sight of it. Impossible, beautiful, alive. Flowers bloomed in riotous colors under enchanted lights that mimicked sunlight. Trees grew tall and strong, their leaves rustling in a breeze created by careful spellwork. Water trickled from a fountain carved from white marble. How? She breathed. Magic, centuries of work. I created this place when I first became king, when the weight of never seeing the sun again threatened to crush me. Draconis led her deeper into the garden, to a bench beneath a willow tree. This is where I come when I need to remember beauty, hope. They sat together, surrounded by living things that shouldn't exist so far underground, and Olivia felt tears slip down her cheeks. Thank you for showing me this. I wanted you to see it, to understand that even in darkness we can create light. He turned to face her fully, reaching into his pocket to pull out a small box. And I wanted to ask you something. Olivia's breath caught as he opened the box to reveal a ring, not a diamond, but a deep red ruby surrounded by smaller stones that sparkled like captured stars. I know we can't have forever, Draconis said quietly. I know that time will take you from me eventually, and that reality breaks my heart every single day. But I want whatever time we have to be official. Recognized. I want you to be my wife, my queen. I want to spend every moment of your life loving you completely. His voice roughened. Will you marry me, Olivia Hartwell? Joy and sorrow tangled in her chest, joy at his proposal. Sorrow at the reminder of her mortality, at the fact that their love story had a deadline. But the joy won out, bright and fierce. Yes, she said, throwing her arms around him. Yes, absolutely yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They held each other in the secret garden, vampire and human, king and artist, two people who'd found something extraordinary against all odds. The wedding was a spectacle that united both worlds. Vampire nobility filled the underground cathedral alongside human guests, Olivia's friends from her old life. Artists and gallery owners, even some government officials who'd worked with her on the peace initiatives. The ceremony blended traditions from both cultures, presided over by a human officiant and a vampire elder. Olivia wore white silk that seemed to glow in the candlelight, her hair adorned with flowers from Draconis' secret garden. He wore black velvet and silver, looking every inch the vampire king, his white hair falling loose around his shoulders. When he took her hands and spoke his vows, his voice carried through the cathedral. I vow to love you for every day you'll have me. To treasure each moment, each breath, each heartbeat, to stand beside you, protect you, challenge you, and choose you over and over, for as long as we both exist. Olivia's voice shook but held strong as she replied, I vow to love you without fear, to see you as you truly are, not a monster, not just a king, but my partner, my home. I vow to fill our days with light and laughter, to remind you why life is worth living, to choose you every single day. When they kissed, sealing their promises, the cathedral erupted in cheers from both humans and vampires alike. The celebration lasted 3 days, a festival of unity that became legendary in vampire lore. Olivia danced until her feet ached, laughed until her sides hurt, and felt utterly, completely happy. On their wedding night, Draconis carried her to chambers he'd specially prepared, decorated in shades of cream and gold, warm and inviting, with that same portrait she'd painted hanging above the fireplace, the one where she'd captured his loneliness and his hope. Look how far we've come, she said, studying the painting. You brought me back to life, Draconis replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. I'd forgotten how to be anything but a king. You reminded me how to be a person. Olivia turned in his embrace, reaching up to thread her fingers through his white hair. We saved each other, I think. Yes, he kissed her softly. We did. They made love slowly, tenderly, taking their time to map each other's bodies, to whisper promises and endearments. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Olivia's head on Draconis' chest, listening to the silence where his heartbeat should be. I wish I could give you forever, he said quietly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. We have now. That's enough. Is it? Olivia propped herself up to look at him. Draconis, I won't lie and say I'm not scared of dying, of leaving you. But I'd rather have 50 years with you than an eternity without you. It's worth the price of mortality. You're extraordinary. I'm practical. and deeply in love with a vampire king who showed me there's more to life than safety." She kissed him gently. "Stop worrying about the ending. Let's enjoy the middle." He smiled and it transformed his face. "Yes, my queen. Oh, I'm definitely keeping that title." His laugh echoed through their chambers, warm and alive and perfect. The years that followed were full and rich. Olivia's art evolved, her work becoming internationally recognized, exhibited in galleries across both vampire and human territories. She painted portraits of politicians and poets, warriors and scholars. But her favorite subjects remained the quiet moments Draconis reading in their chambers, the secret garden in bloom, the faces of friends and allies who'd become family. She documented their life together in paint and canvas, creating a visual history of their love. Draconis supported her completely, proud of her accomplishments, never asking her to be anything less than fully herself. The Council of Regents he'd proposed was established in their 5th year of marriage, a revolutionary change that transformed vampire governance. There was resistance, of course, attempts to undermine the new system, but Draconis held firm, and Olivia worked behind the scenes to build coalitions and find compromises. "You're as much a ruler as I am," Draconis told her one evening after she'd successfully negotiated a particularly thorny dispute between territories. "I'm your partner. We rule together." "Yes, we do." On Olivia's 35th birthday, Draconis threw her a party in the secret garden. He'd expanded it over the years, adding new sections, new wonders. Now it sprawled across multiple chambers, a hidden paradise where they could pretend the sun still existed. "Make a wish," he said as she stood before a cake covered in candles. Olivia closed her eyes, thought about everything she had: love, purpose, a life richer than she'd ever imagined, and wished for more time, more years, more moments like this. She blew out the candles, and Draconis pulled her into his arms. "What did you wish for?" he asked. "I can't tell you. It won't come true. Then I'll have to guess." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You wished for more of this, more of us. You know me too well. I've had 11 years to learn." His expression grew serious. "Olivia, there's something I need to discuss with you." Her heart stuttered. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous, just complicated." He led her to a bench beneath a flowering tree. "You know that vampire blood has properties, that it can heal wounds, extend life, even turn humans if given in the right circumstances." Yes, she'd learned vampire lore thoroughly over the years. There are other things it can do too. Smaller things, like slowing aging. He took her hands. "I could give you blood regularly, not enough to turn you, but enough to extend your lifespan. To give us more time." Olivia's mind raced. "How much more time? Decades, maybe." "It's not a perfect solution. You'd still be mortal, still age eventually. But it would slow the process. Give us 50 years instead of 30, maybe more." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're 35 and I can see time starting to touch you. Not much, a few lines around your eyes, a silver hair or two. But it reminds me that you're slipping away from me, bit by bit." His voice cracked. "And I'm not ready to lose you." Olivia sat with the information, turning it over in her mind. More time with Draconis. More years to love and create and build. But also more years of watching him stay unchanged while she grew older. More years of the fundamental difference between them. "What do you want?" she asked finally. "I want you to choose freely. If you're ready to age naturally, to let our time be what it is, I'll support that. But if you want more years, Olivia, I would give anything for more years with you." She looked at him, at the love and fear and hope in his ancient eyes, and knew her answer. "I want more time. With you, with our life together. I want every day I can get." Relief flooded his features. "You're sure?" "Completely sure." He kissed her, deep and grateful, and Olivia felt the rightness of the decision settle in her bones. They would have more time, not forever, but more. That night he gave her his blood for the first time, just a few drops mixed in wine, ancient and powerful. It tasted of metal and magic, and she felt it settle into her system, subtle but undeniable. The effects were gradual but real. Over the following months, the fine lines around her eyes faded slightly. Her energy increased, her body felt stronger. She wasn't getting younger, but she'd stopped getting older at quite the same pace. The blood ritual became part of their routine once a month, a small amount carefully measured. It bought them time, precious and hard-won. Olivia's 40th birthday came and went, and she looked barely a day older than 35. Her 50th looked the same. Draconis remained unchanged beside her, eternal, and the gap between them felt less like a chasm and more like something they could navigate together. She continued to paint, to build bridges between worlds, to be the queen the vampire court needed, and the partner Draconis deserved. Their love deepened with each passing year, growing roots that felt unshakable. In their 20th year of marriage, Olivia organized a massive exhibition, a retrospective of her work, displayed in galleries across 3 cities. The centerpiece was a series she'd painted over the years, documenting her life with Draconis, the secret garden, their wedding, quiet moments of domesticity, grand political triumphs. All of it captured in paint and love and brutal honesty. The exhibition was a sensation, drawing crowds from both human and vampire communities. People stood in front of her canvases and wept, moved by the love story rendered in color and light. Draconis attended the opening night resplendent in formal attire, and stood before the very first portrait she'd painted of him, the one that had started everything. "You captured something I'd forgotten," he said quietly. "That I was more than just a king. You were always more." Olivia slipped her hand into his. "I just helped you remember." That night they returned to the palace and made love in their chambers, surrounded by all the accumulated treasures of their life together. Afterward, Draconis held her close and whispered the words he'd said countless times but never tired of repeating. "I love you, Olivia Nightshade." She'd taken his name when they married, a declaration of belonging that had scandalized some of the more traditional vampires. But she wore it proudly, this evidence that she was his and he was hers. "I love you too," she replied, "for all the years we have left." Those years continued to unspool, rich and full. Olivia celebrated her 60th birthday looking like she was in her mid-40s, vital and vibrant. The vampire blood did its work, giving them time, but she knew it wasn't infinite. Eventually, nature would claim its due. She didn't fear death the way she once might have. She'd lived a life beyond her wildest dreams, loved a being of myth and legend, changed the world in small but meaningful ways. When her time came, she would go without regret, but not yet. Not when there was still so much to experience, so much to paint, so many moments to share with the vampire king who'd stolen her heart with his loneliness and won her soul with his love. At 70, Olivia finally started to look her age, the blood's effects unable to hold back time indefinitely. Her hair silvered completely. Wrinkles carved themselves into her face. Her hands grew less steady, but her eyes remained bright, her mind sharp, her heart completely and utterly devoted to Draconis. He was attentive to her changing needs, ordering the palace modified for her comfort, ensuring she had everything she required. He never made her feel diminished by her aging, never treated her as fragile. "You're beautiful," he told her one evening as he helped her prepare for bed, a nightly ritual that had become necessary as her body grew less reliable. "I'm old, you're distinguished. Regal." He kissed her forehead gently, "and still the most captivating person I've ever known." Olivia smiled, feeling love down to her bones. "Flatterer, truth-teller, you know I don't lie." She laughed, delighted that he'd turned her own words back on her. "Come to bed. Hold me." He did, wrapping himself around her carefully, supporting her weight, keeping her warm. She drifted off to sleep feeling safe and cherished, exactly as she had every night for nearly 50 years. At 75, Olivia's health began to fail in earnest. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, inevitable decline of a mortal body that had lived a long, full life. She tired more easily, needed more rest, found herself spending more time in their chambers and less moving through the palace. Draconis never left her side unless absolutely necessary. He conducted council meetings from their rooms, brought work to her, ensured she was never alone. His devotion was absolute, unwavering. "You should be ruling," she told him on a particularly difficult day, when even sitting up felt exhausting. "I am ruling, from here." He set aside the document he'd been reading and took her hand. "Nothing is more important than being with you. The council can function without me hovering over every decision. That's the whole point of the system we built." He pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Let me be here, love. Let me have these moments." So she did, letting him read to her from the books she loved, letting him describe the secret garden and the palace and the world beyond their chambers, letting him love her through the failing of her body. On a quiet evening in early spring, though Olivia only knew it was spring because Draconis told her, unable to see the sun or feel its warmth, she felt the end approaching. Her body was giving out, systems shutting down one by one. "Draconis," she whispered. He was beside her instantly, taking her hand, his face calm despite the agony she knew he must be feeling. "I'm here. I need you to know something. Anything. These years with you, they were everything. More than I ever dreamed possible." Her voice was weak but clear. "I would choose you again 1,000 times over." Tears slipped down his face, crystalline and beautiful. "And I would choose you, every time, in every life. Don't mourn me too long." She squeezed his hand with what little strength she had left. "Live. Rule. Keep building the world we dreamed of." "I will, I promise." He climbed into bed beside her, gathering her gently into his arms. "But I'll never stop loving you." "Good," she smiled, peaceful. "That's good." The end came softly, like slipping into sleep. One moment Olivia was breathing, held safe in Draconis's embrace, and the next she was simply gone. The spark that had made her extraordinary, that had captured a vampire king's heart, extinguished like a candle flame. Draconis held her for hours, unwilling to let go, mourning the loss of the woman who'd changed everything, who'd reminded him what it meant to be more than just a king, who'd loved him completely despite everything he was. Finally, as the false dawn broke over his eternal night, he stood and carried her to the secret garden. He'd already prepared a place for her there, beneath the willow tree where he'd proposed. He laid her to rest surrounded by beauty and light, exactly as she'd lived. The funeral was attended by thousands, vampires and humans alike, all come to pay their respects to the human queen who'd transformed their world. Draconis presided over it with regal grace, accepting condolences honoring his wife's memory. But afterward, alone in their chambers, he finally let himself break. He wept for all the years he wouldn't have, for the future they'd never share, for the impossible cruelty of loving a mortal being when you yourself couldn't die. In his grief, he considered walking into the sun, ending an existence that felt hollow without Olivia's light. But he'd made her a promise to live, to rule, to keep building their dream, so he did. Draconis threw himself into his work, into the Council of Regents, into strengthening the peace between vampires and humans. He established scholarships in Olivia's name for young artists, created cultural programs to honor her legacy, ensured her vision for a united world continued to grow. Her paintings remained throughout the palace, a constant reminder of what they'd built together. He kept their chambers exactly as she'd left them, visited the secret garden every evening to sit beneath the willow tree, and talk to her as if she could still hear him. Slowly, painfully, he learned to live with the loss. Not to move past it, he would never move past Olivia, but to carry it with grace, the way she'd taught him to carry all burdens. Years passed. Decades. The world continued to change, and Draconis changed with it, always pushing for progress, for unity, for the dream he and Olivia had shared. A century after her death, on what would have been her 175th birthday, Draconis stood in the secret garden and spoke to the willow tree. "I kept my promise, love. The world we dreamed of, it's real. Humans and vampires working together, building together. The Council of Regents has spread to other territories. There's peace, genuine peace." He paused, imagining her voice, her response. She would have been proud, he knew, thrilled to see how far they'd come. "I miss you," he continued quietly, "every single day. But I'm grateful for the time we had, for the way you changed me, saved me, loved me." The garden was silent except for the whisper of enchanted wind through leaves. Draconis closed his eyes and let himself remember her laugh, her paint-stained fingers, the way she'd looked at him without fear, the way she'd forgotten he was a monster and seen only a man. He would carry her memory for the rest of his immortal life, a treasure more precious than his crown, more valuable than all the centuries before or after. She'd given him something extraordinary, not forever, but something better. She'd given him a reason to believe in love. And that, Draconis knew, was worth any price, worth any pain, worth the impossible, beautiful tragedy of their story. In the secret garden, beneath the willow tree where a human queen rested, the vampire king smiled through his tears and whispered the words that would echo through eternity. "Thank you, my love, for everything.